Hey, everybody, this is Tom Salemi of DeviceTalks. Welcome back to the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. Fantastic episode coming your way. We'll talk a little later in the podcast with Stephen From. He's the newish CEO of Vicarious Surgical, which I think is one of the cooler surgical robotics companies out there. Stephen makes a great case that it's more of a medical device company than perhaps some of us have given it credit for. So real conversation about the real business part of surgical robotics with Stephen From. So you'll hear that a little later in the podcast. Just before that, you'll hear our FOMO conversation, my FOMO conversation with the fine folks at Harmonic Drive. Thanks to them for sponsoring this episode and contributing this episode's FOMO interview. And of course, we'll kick the whole thing off with Chris Newmarker, the editor of MassDevice. So we'll hear the top news of the week. But before we begin, I'd love to invite you to be part of our in-person events. Device Talks Minnesota is coming up on May 4th. And of course, we'll be at Device Talks Boston on May 27th and 28th. If you haven't registered for either yet, feel free to use this code made especially for you, Device Talks Weekly podcast listeners. Go to use the code DTW, Device Talks Weekly, DTW25 for 25% off. So register with the code DTW25 to save yourself a little bit of coin when you register to join us at Device Talks Minnesota and or Device Talks Boston. All right, without any further delay, let's get this podcast started. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Chris Newmarker, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Tom. Doing well.
Little backstage talk for folks. Chris and I couldn't even get started on this podcast. We couldn't even get our "How you going, sir?" going. So this is going to be a rough one. Folks might want to just fast forward through the conversation.
Might not even want to listen to this. Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
we got an interesting news week for sure. Lots of I think fantastic new technologies, some geopolitical ramifications, and a cool acquisition. So you got everything. You got it all in this week's news.
Yeah, and the geopolitical thing. I mean, the world's so peaceful right now, right, Tom? It's
you know. I won't say anything.
Yeah, just
yeah.
These are interesting times for sure, but however, okay, so I mean, let's lighten the mood a bit.
Yes.
Do you have problems with turkeys in your area in Massachusetts?
The country or the bird?
The country is great. I mean, Istanbul is definitely on my list of
I'm
global
definitely
cities that I'd like
so
to see.
I have no problem with turkey whatsoever. As for the birds, do I have problems with? No, I don't have problems with turkeys. They are around and they are often intimidating, but I've never had an encounter with one. Why do you ask?
Oh, they were intimidating my kids this morning.
Oh, were they?
There was a whole group of toms in the driveway gobbling very loud.
Wow!
Like when the kids came out, so I had to kind of gently usher them away. But we have large cottonwoods behind our house, and they've really they've decided to start roosting in our cottonwoods at night. So instead of getting a rooster call, I'm getting like a gobble in the morning when I'm waking up. I mean, really, and it's great when the males do that big feather display at the same time. They were all doing that.
Doesn't that mean they're about to strike? I don't know what happened. I don't know if I've ever seen a feather display. Is that a good thing to see?
No, that's not. It's a bit aggressive. They're a bit yeah. But at least we don't feed them. I mean, I've heard I think the state DNR has something on their site here in Minnesota that you shouldn't be friendly to them because in turkey psychology, if you're friendly to them, they think you're part of the flock. And then the head male will attack you to show you who's boss. So, you should just keep some distance, enjoy the view. I mean,
turkeys have a look. If you walk by, what is it? What is the group of turkeys? It's not a flock, right? What is it?
I've heard you can call it a parade of turkeys.
Really? I don't think that's what I'm thinking about. But if you walk by a large group of turkeys in the park, and they stare at you, you're glad they're not carnivores, because if they were, I'm pretty sure they would just go right after you. Like they have a killer look about them. Turkey's got a fearsome glare, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if they didn't have feathers, they'd be like velociraptors or
Exactly.
something. I mean,
Exactly.
they'd be just hunting you down. That's the way you'd go. That'd be the last thing you'd hear in your life would be like, blah, 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 and that's it.
So, well, I'm sorry that the turkeys frighten the tiny Newmarkers, but I'm sure you'll teach them a valuable life lesson from that experience.
Yeah, it's making them tough. We're just toughing them up. It'll be good.
Yeah, tough street
Totally.
kids. Tough street kids for sure.
That's right, tough street kids.
Did you have bullies? No, we didn't have bullies. We had turkeys.
I did like when we moved a little farther out into the suburbs. My oldest was at the bus stop, like telling some other kid, like, well, back when I was more in the city, like in St. Louis Park, like I'm like, give me a break, dude. You're still in the suburbs. Like you're not. No,
The
stop.
mean streets of St. Louis Park.
It's in the mean streets. You went from inner suburban to just a little less inner suburban.
It's a big move for a little kid, but all right, Chris Newmarker.
Yeah,
As we
there you
mentioned at the top, you get a lot of news this week in the Newsmakers, which you
yeah,
always
there is
do.
a lot of news.
Yeah, but I think an interesting compilation of events. So why don't we
Absolutely.
stroll over to number 5 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers?
Yeah, number 5 on the list is Petal Surgical adding more funding. They're now like at like a total of $25 million in funding, and they've like added on Dr. Fred Moll to his board. I'm kind of wondering at this point, Tom, is there a surgical robotic company that does not have Fred Moll on the board? That would almost seem more unusual. I mean, it seems.
I don't think he's on the board of Intuitive, right?
Well, no. I mean, he co-founded it, but yeah, he's not on the board.
But is there a company that he did not touch? Very few.
It's
Now,
true.
there's obviously
Yeah.
such, but no, he is. He remains very well engaged in this industry he helped create.
It seems like right now in surgical robotics, having Fred Moll on the board seems to be like the stamp of approval. Like, look, we've got Fred Moll on the board, so like we got something going on. And Petal is, I mean, definitely like really exciting technology. I mean, this is like hippotrypsy. I mean, there's also a company here in the Twin Cities, Histosonics, that's involved with that technology. But this idea of like incisionless surgery using focused ultrasound to like dissolve tissue inside the body. It's just really exciting stuff.
I feel like you're just teeing me up, Chris Newmarker. You're throwing in these softballs because we're going to have Prav Chopra, the CEO of Petal Surgical, giving a FOMO presentation at DeviceTalks Boston, and you are going to be leading the keynote conversation. Yes, we are. And
No
you're going
way.
to be leading the keynote conversation with Mike Blue of Histosonics at
Get out of here, man!
at
Really?
DeviceTalks
Yeah,
Minnesota.
that's right. Yeah.
So these are not why these folks are on the newsmakers. No, sir. They are genuine
Absolutely
newsmakers.
not.
We just we have nothing but big newsmakers at our Device Talks meetings. So
I mean, seriously, it's like we're covering this news and it's getting excitement in the industry that informs us, you, and our decision making on what we bring into these events. So I mean, it's like I just love the relationship we have here, that the news and the excitement in the industry like informs
absolutely
Device Talks on what we get into the events, and vice versa. Then like we bring people into the events and it makes more news. So it's just fantastic. And people can, I strongly encourage people like register for Device Talks Minnesota, register for Device Talks Boston. You can come and like just be part of the magic. It'll be awesome.
That's good. Yes, and of course we have our code for our podcast listeners. Folks can get 25% off the price for listening to the Device Talks Weekly podcast. So make sure you use the code that I mentioned at the top of the podcast. Going back to your original point, Chris Newmarker, you also had this week, or Sean Hooley did at least anyway, on MassDevice, that Fred Moll, I believe, co-led around an investment round in XCath, another surgical robotics company. So
yeah,
not on the board, but he is involved.
Yeah, I mean, it's just wild. I mean, I was being a little tongue in cheek, but really, it just seems like every up and coming robotics company, it's hard not to see a story that doesn't have Fred Moll's name in it at this point. So it's really cool to see everything he's doing around the industry.
All right, well, that's a great number 5, Chris Newmarker. Let's roll on to number 4.
Hey, number 4. This is Also from Sean Hooley. Actually, all of our stories this week are from Sean Hooley. We actually keep an eye out on MassDevice. We've got a surgical robotics special report coming out that I've been busily editing, and Sean has been, really just keeping MassDevice rolling here. This week. I mean, it's just amazing everything he does for us.
Sean Hooley, bingo, everybody. You won.
That's right, Sean Hooley, bing. So here you go. And number 4, we've got Abbott completing a $20 billion offering, and this is going to, pay for their $21 billion purchase of Exact Sciences, which is best known for making the Cologuard test, which, especially dudes around our age, have a pretty good idea what that's all about. But I mean, this just represents like a really big expansion of diagnostics at Abbott, a really big diagnostics play for them.
I've never used the Cologuard. I could go through my colonoscopy story again if you want, Chris Newmarker. Do you want to hear that?
Let's pass.
Do you want to give us your Cologuard story? You want to share that?
I mean, it was a pretty user-friendly test. They do pester you a lot to get it mailed back to them, so shipped back to them. They like phone calls, texts, emails, like, hey, that box you got in there. So
you're just yes, I haven't gone yet. That's all.
I still always love my late dad. One of his best friends in my hometown was a funeral director, and gave my dad a lift to a colonoscopy, and the doctor was like, "Do you have somebody to give you a lift home?" He's like, "Yeah, my funeral director is going to be coming to get me after this."
And the doctor's like, "It's really, you'll be fine. Like, it's not a big deal."
You didn't really need to do that.
And once again, we won't be talking about the acquisition of Exact Sciences because this doesn't fall under her purview, but Lisa Earnhardt of Abbott will be our closing keynote at DeviceTalks Minnesota.
Yeah, super excited for that.
Yep. All right, Chris Newmarker, what is number 3?
Hey, number 3 on the list is Stryker launching their SmartHospital platform to elevate care delivery, and you had some really good insights about that on LinkedIn, Tom. I mean, like pointing out this is actually, I mean, when you think, I mean, even me, when I think of Stryker, I think of Mako Robotics, I think of orthopedic implants, I think of surgical tools. But I mean, you're making a point that this is like a big part of their business.
Yeah, no, definitely a big part of Stryker. And you're right. And when you hear about hospital beds and things like that, you're like, well, all right, there's not a lot there, or even communication badges for nurses. But if you look at the numbers in their 10K, it's a big business with high growth. And as Jessica Matheson said last week on the podcast, it's an unregulated industry. So they can innovate faster there, and they can move faster there, and they can develop new products there. So she was on the podcast talking about the SmartHospital platform and about the inclusion of Care AI and Vocera in that. And I'm really loving the stories of these companies that are developing tools that really fit kind of into the hospital workflow and really kind of help make up for the shortfalls that folks are seeing in the workforce. So I think SmartHospital is a definite addition to that. So, and I, as I said in the podcast last week, I think if you're a nurse who has this badge that you don't need your hands to communicate to your colleagues, and you have these sensors in rooms that allow you to know when a patient got up or didn't get up, and just gives you that information and that data. And you have people who are nurses who maybe don't want to walk the floor anymore, but they're in a room somewhere watching all these patients. I mean, it's just a stronger safety net. So it's really just a super platform. So happy to have Stryker. They released that at HIMSS this week. So didn't realize they were announcing it this week.
And if people want to find out more about this, our associate Skylar Rivera, she has a draft overview of an article written off last week's podcast. Yeah. So we'll be and we're talking on Thursday. We should have that story posted Friday on MassDevice, so you can read a really good write up. I mean, Skylar's just been doing a great job. Writing some really insightful stories off of our podcast interviews, and we'll have another one up off the Stryker interview tomorrow, Friday.
Yeah, for sure. And Skylar's been doing a great job with those write-ups. As we talked about last week, the Jenny Barber article was so good it was a newsmaker unto its own. So let's roll onto number 2. It's kind of we've had back-to-backs before with the same companies being newsmakers, but I find this juxtaposition interesting, given that the one we just talked about is focused on connectivity, And
Yes, they have this new connected hospital
Yep.
system, and then next, they got an Iran-backed cyberattack on their business. Wow. So
yeah, I didn't see that one coming.
Sean and Skylar did a great job jumping on the news and having a roundup of everything that unfortunately Stryker's been going through with this cyber attack. It looks like there was attacks on their Cork, Ireland location and more. So yeah, I mean that's I suspect that as this war in Iran continues, that we're gonna see many more American companies getting hit in different ways by cyber attacks that are backed by Iran.
Yeah, no, I know you had sent this article out in our internal Slack to the editors of our other verticals covering other industries, just giving them a heads up that you hope you don't see this in your industries, but just so you know, this happened in ours. So I agree with you 100%. We've got some vulnerabilities. I think everyone does. So, and I think we'll find out where some of those are over the next weeks or months or however long this goes on for. We're not quite sure.
And we're not quite sure. There's a lot of different messages on it.
But before you, I just noticed it was on MassDevice, and Sean has a follow-up to this article, entitled "What Stryker Cyber Attack Could Mean for MedTech and Healthcare," and he talked with Mike Kajewski, the CEO of MedCrypt, for that. So folks should, if they haven't already, go on MassDevice and check that out as well for a little more context.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We'll be staying on top of this. So.
And Chris Newmarker, what's the big number one?
Hey, the big number one is Medtronic continues on this roll with making M&A and business deals, and the latest one is $550 million for Scientia Vascular, which they're based in Utah, make access products for treating complex neurovascular conditions. But this really looks like a stroke treatment tech play on the part of Medtronic.
Yeah, really, the reading I did on this, it really seemed to be a counter to Boston Scientific's acquisition of Penumbra. Penumbra has a great R&D department that really developed some clever access tools, and I don't know for sure that Medtronic felt they needed better tools, but this is what Scientia gives them. They give them greater ways to get their already effective stroke devices where they need to be. So definitely seeing a bit of a space race in the stroke space. So I got no problem with that.
Fantastic.
It's an area that needs innovation. As you said, competition breeds innovation, as you like to say all the time. And I think this is another example of that.
Yeah. It's fantastic. So yeah, and the good news for, just one of the biggest killers in our country and the world, and very debilitating as well. So, if we can get better treatments out there, fantastic.
Absolutely. All right, Chris Newmarker, great top five, folks. Though they don't have to wait for this podcast to get top 5 news of the day, right, Chris?
Absolutely. Go to MassDevice's homepage. Right at the top, you can sign up for the MassDevice daily e-newsletters, our +5 and +7. Get this in your inbox every day. But thanks again for listening.
Absolutely. We're going to, once again, have the entire MassDevice MDO and DeviceTalks teams at DeviceTalks Boston. So excited about that, to get the news team together. We'll be there to cover
MedTech team assemble.
MedTech team assemble. We'll be covering some of what goes on in the rooms, but we'll certainly be down on the floor meeting with our great sponsors and presenters down there as well. So make sure you folks join us at DeviceTalks Boston and, of course, DeviceTalks Minnesota. Well, Chris Newmarker, thanks again for this week's Newmarker's Newsmakers.
It's great as always, Tom. Take care. Talking soon, man.
All right, now it's time to bring our FOMO to you. It's brought to you by Harmonic Drive. You can find out more information about Harmonic Drive on their website. Harmonic Drive's your one-stop headquarters for miniature speed reducer products designed for applications that require smaller space-saving components. You can see a lot more at harmonicdrive.net. That's HARMONIC drive.net. Now we'll have our conversation with Bill Frey of Harmonic Drive. Let's listen. Well, Bill Frey, Regional Sales Engineer at Harmonic Drive, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Tom.
So when people talk about surgical robotics, I think we've been talking a lot more about visualization and software. But give us a sense of how foundational the mechanical precision layer underneath all of that. How important is that?
Oh, it's very important. You may have seen a test apparatus where they're simulating an operation by picking up little tiny objects,
Hmm.
and it's very hard for the end effector to actually pick up these objects. And operator, the surgeon, is operating them remotely. They're not actually the fingers aren't in there, so the reliability, the repeatability and the backlash is very important.
So in surgery, I think, well, you could either the expert, I may, but surgical robotics, I imagine that they're the arms, the devices, the instruments that are being used in the procedure need to move more smoothly than in other industries. True or false? Let's unpack that first.
It is true. There are exceptions. There are some industries where you do want very smooth motion.
Yeah, sure.
And if you picture a camera that's looking at an object far away, if there's any vibration, you'll see that in the camera, for example. And that can be fixed up, electronically throughout the camera software. But in the case of a medical device, it's very, very important to have smooth motion.
So, Bill, if we could sort of unpack specifically what goes into eliminating the backlash and the vibration, and I guess you could describe it as a herky jerky sort of feel in surgical robotics. Maybe we could sort of talk about the various elements and I guess procedures that you folks do and you folks support. And let's just focus on that. And then I have a follow up question. What goes into stabilizing a surgical robotic arm?
Well, in the case of our products, the gearing itself has a very high accuracy and high transmission accuracy. So when they're driven by a motor, you tend to have a very smooth output on the output side from the gear. And being if you mentioned an arm, you have that extra distance where any kind of lost motion or vibration is amplified by that arm.
So as we talked about, you've worked in other industries. Surgical robotics, or I'm sorry, robotics everywhere I think needs to operate at a degree of smoothness and precision. In surgery, though, smooth motion, I think it's more critical, no pun intended, more life-saving technology. What actually goes into what parts and what process goes into ensuring that you're able to eliminate backlash and vibration and any kind of herky-jerky feel? And then maybe after we can sort of unpack what are some of the products that help us get there.
Well, there's a few things. So the mechanical transmission, for one, so from the motor side into the actual output, as
Mhm.
well as the position feedback. So the mechanism needs to know where it is at any given moment. So you have some
Sure.
sort of feedback mechanism. For example, an encoder, you may have a torque sensor involved as well.
So with surgical robotic systems and surgical robotics arms, I would think that you're working at a much smaller scale. How difficult it is to build something that has all these components and elements that are necessary for that smooth motion in something that must exist at such a small scale.
Well, a lot of this is it's designed by the medical device manufacturer because there's nothing that just exists on the market. In this case, typically a lot of different components are assembled and tested to achieve what they're looking for.
One thing that's always fascinated me about surgical robotics is that industrial robots, they sort of are execute to program motions that are necessary to sort of complete something, complete a car, or now move a box or whatever they're doing in other industries. Surgical robotics sort of amplify the human hand, the surgeon's hand. How does this fundamentally change sort of the mechanical requirements of a surgical robotic system, and how does harmonic drive help with that?
Well, you have a good point. It's not just a mechanism that's just picking up something, repeating the same motion over and over. In
Hmm.
this case, it's driven by an operator surgeon, and they need to be able to control the device as if their hands are at the end effector. When they want to make a move, they want to have very very quick and accurate movement on the output, which is to what the move that they commanded.
Hmm.
In addition, a lot of these devices may have haptic feedback, where they actually have some sort of resistance at the control, which is proportional in effect to what's seen on the end effector.
Let's drill down a little bit on haptic feedback. That's become obviously it's been a point of conversation for years, but I think more importantly, more recently, it's become seen as sort of a differentiator between surgical robotics, some surgical robotic systems, one from another. As haptics and force feedback evolve, how important is the sort of the ultra precise gearing that goes into providing that enables that surgeon experience that allow them to sort of quote unquote feel the tissue that they're working on?
Yeah, it's very important because if you have any kind of backlash or lost motion in the system as you're trying to operate it, you're now missing your spot on the output side, on the end effector. So this applies to a pick and place type of unit where if you picture that here you are with a joystick trying to pick something up and you're trying to go to a certain spot, but you have lost motion, you have some backlash, you have trouble achieving what you're trying to do. And it's in this industry, it's even more important than what you might see in other industries.
Is that sort of feedback unique to surgical robotics that sort of you need to feel what you're quote unquote touching, or have you seen that in other industries as well?
Well, typically in an industry where it's a human operating it,
Yeah.
obviously, I suppose, but like a pick and place device or
Oh
a
yeah.
some kind of thing where the operator is actually trying to have dexterity on the output.
Mm, interesting. So I mean, we've seen a lot in other industries or in other technologies that things develop faster in industries outside of medical devices for the simple fact that well, I think the stakes are higher maybe here than elsewhere, and it's also highly regulated. But and as a result, I think medical device companies are able to learn lessons that have been experienced in other industries. Final question: what lessons from aerospace or semiconductor precision systems can surgical robotics learn from and maybe adopt more aggressively?
Well, it's certainly an industry that's growing and utilizing a lot of knowledge from other industries.
Hmm.
And it's a case where the lessons learned from robotics field is being applied into new industries such as this one. Specifically, there's probably a lot more behind the scenes than I'm aware of. Usually, I have customers asking questions for the various applications, but why they have their requirements sometimes I'm not fully aware of.
Do you think are there areas within surgical robotics that are blazing new trails and are doing things that you have not seen or others have not seen in other robotics industries, or are our experiences again paths that others have already sort of blazed or trails that others have already blazed?
Certainly, there's new developments coming out and new technology being used and new applications, new types of approach to achieving solutions. So it's exciting. It's always growing and it's always different.
And as again, we're seeing a lot of final question. I do that sometimes. We're seeing a lot of innovation and a lot of advancement. I think in surgical robotics of different form factors and different applications over the last 5 years in particular. Where do you think that energy is coming from? That's drawing all of these new technologies, both from larger companies and small, into our consciousness and eventually onto the marketplace in the future. Is it just do we see from other industries, maybe you've seen it before, do you see a critical mass of great ideas just sort of coming together, coalescing, and just pushing an industry forward? And are we at that point with surgical robotics?
I think we are at that point. It's a lot of these ideas have been floated around for years, but now the
Hmm.
technology's caught up. And so now with the products that are available now, the technology, the capability of computers and
Hmm.
everything, and also the general acceptance of the concept of medical devices being automated, it's a whole new world now for this.
That's great. It must be an exciting time for you to be part of surgical robotics right now.
Yes, it is.
Excellent. All right, Bill Fry. Well, thanks so much for your vision of the future and for joining us on FOMO.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, well, thanks again to Harmonic Drive for providing this week's FOMO. If you'd like more information about Harmonic Drive, go to its website, harmonicdrive.net. That's HARMONIC drive.net. All right, now it's time for our keynote conversation. I spoke with Stephen Fromm. He is the CEO of Vicarious Surgical. He joined the company last year. We'll get into his history. At the time, I was sort of surprised by the appointment because I've known him from biotech circles and wondered how he fit into surgical robotics. But I really enjoyed this conversation with Stephen. Sort of unpacked these companies and these technologies not as sort of things of wonder, but products of business. And he really, I think, helped me see how to set some priorities. So I hope you'll enjoy this conversation with Stephen. I did talk to him back in December. So some time has passed, but I did connect with him, and no updates necessary. There's some news about them of late, but we'll get into the important stuff in this conversation. Well, Stephen Fromm, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Tom.
My pleasure. So, full disclosure for folks, Stephen and I have talked, both of us in our previous professional lives. I was running the OIS podcast. Stephen was the CEO of iGate Pharmaceuticals. So we've talked before, but about a completely different topic. But I'm really happy to be circling back again to talk about Vicarious Surgical. As I told Stephen prior to pushing record, I came to know Vicarious and Adam Sachs. I think it was probably April 2020 or so, right around the start of the pandemic, and it was one of those medtech stories that just I remember uplifted me because it was just so damn cool and really hopeful. And we want to sort of unpack that spirit and see what's happened over the last 5 years or so. We've had Adam on a few times since, but happy to have Stephen here to sort of let us know where we're going next. But Stephen, before we get into Vicarious's story, we'd love to understand your story a bit. I usually ask people how you got into medtech, but that answer is kind of identical to what we're going to be talking about today because this is your first sort of medtech position. You're really a pharma guy, right?
Yeah, most of my time has been on the biotech space. Yes.
Yeah. So how did you find your way into the biotech and life sciences industries?
Well, that is a lot to unpack. I'll try to do it as quick as possible. So I was formally trained in accounting and finance.
Okay.
And I'm originally from the Toronto area, and I started life as a chartered accountant at Price Waterhouse.
Wow.
And after I qualified, I actually got seconded to a M&A house in investment banking. And so I left accounting and went into that. And I did M&A in telecoms, to believe it or not. And where I was working got acquired by a bank over in London. So I moved over to London and got into life sciences doing M&A and then equity capital markets. Did that for a little while. And then I decided to get out of banking and I left and started working for Aventis in Paris. They were looking to spin out a gene therapy company. And I came on board as their CFO. And I was on the board of other companies. And one of them was a startup that was founded by a French VC in ophthalmology. In fact, it was a device. It was iontophoresis, delivering device. So we delivered drugs to the back of the eye non-invasively. And it was just me and one other guy. And so I went out and raised money and on the hope that if I raised money, I could move the company to Boston. And that's what I did. And I built the company up from nothing and took it public on NASDAQ. And, that became iGate Pharmaceutical.
So what was it about life sciences that resonated with you? Because if you had a fairly neutral background, you could have applied yourself to much more predictable industries than this one. What was that connection?
I think in the background, I've always loved biology, right? And I've always really wanted to dig. So in the background, I was always reading about that kind of stuff. And it really intrigued me more than telecoms did. And so there was an opportunity to get involved on the life science side. I jumped at it and I've never looked back. I've loved it. And the thing is, running these types of companies, you need multiple different hats and you need to be able to understand multiple different things, not just the business side, but also the science side. So I've had to do a lot of self-learning to really be able to have conversations with the right people in order to understand how to move a company forward in the life science space. But it did start out with a medical device. So I did understand, very quickly with the FDA, the CDRH route, and also because we were delivering a drug, I had to understand combination products and So I had to understand both sides of it very early on.
Sure. And I can relate to that. I started covering medtech and life sciences in 1998 when all my friends were covering .coms and websites, and I had no interest in that, but I really love talking about life sciences, so I can certainly relate. As I mentioned at the top, we talked when you were with iGate Pharmaceuticals. That was different than the company you just referenced. That wasn't just a name change. That was a different ophthalmology company.
No, it was the same one.
Oh, it
It
was.
started
Okay.
out the name was Optus at the time, and
Okay.
then when I moved it to Boston after I did a fundraise, we renamed it iGate
Oh, all
Pharmaceutical.
right. I should have done my research a little bit better than that. So, ophthalmology is definitely an interesting industry to be in. What was the outcome for iGate? When did you leave that company?
So, after we went public, I very quickly did a licensing agreement with Bausch& and Lomb,
Hmm.
and so then they funded the pivotal studies and so forth for uveitis and other indications, and along the way, I did a couple of small acquisitions of smaller startups in the ophthalmology space. And then I decided to leave. So I became executive chairman for a little while and left and became CEO of a different. I'd spent enough time there. I decided to get out and left and brought on a different CEO. And they asked me to stay for a year as executive chairman because this person had never been the CEO of a public company before.
Hmm.
And so that's why I left. And then an opportunity came up to be the CEO of another private company, an earlier stage company in regenerative medicine. And that was really so there were a couple of things that really interested me, and why I'm bringing that up is what led me to Vicarious as well. I had been doing it for so long, and I was really looking for a challenge, and I was looking for something new, something that could teach me something that I hadn't known about before. And
Hmm.
regenerative medicine was a really exciting area. And when I first got into this, I was doing some gene therapy for Aventis, Sanofi Aventis over in France. And to have the ability to come back to regenerative medicine, because it's evolved so much, and here was a company that was doing something very unique, and they were having a lot of difficulties trying to understand what the proper business model should be and actually how to get through the FDA with an IND because there had never been one before, and they were having a lot of difficulties. There was something called exosomes. And anyhow, so I came on board and figured out the business model, and we got the first IND ever cleared for an exosome from a neural progenitor cell. And it was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun doing that as well. And then another opportunity came up, which led me to Vicarious, and there
Hmm.
was a similar type of background here. They were having difficulty with something. There was a stage that they were trying to get to, and they were having difficulty getting there. And so I got introduced to this company through the CFO because she had been at iGate for a little while. And she had mentioned to Adam that he should have a coffee with me. And that started everything.
Interesting.
Yeah.
As you were talking about the gene therapy company Aruna, you're right. I kind of see now that I see sort of the connection because Vicarious Surgical is not the same as but it's a swing for the fences. I mean, if you go to your website and you look at the robot and you look at this basically tiny implantable surgeon that you want to stick through, you want to insert into a person's abdomen through a single port and have the entire surgeon with wrists and elbows and surgical tools all inside with cameras and lights. It's really a home run swing. I mean, it's completely different than most of the surgical robotic systems out there, which is why it's so compelling. But it's also, I'm guessing, why it's so difficult to sort of get it to where it needs to go, at least as a commercial venture. So when you joined, I was kind of curious as to how this biotech executive, and I did know you from the past, sort of how you got involved with Vicarious. But now, as you explain the story, it certainly does make a lot of sense. It's consistent with your past themes.
Well, I look, there's a lot of early stage life science companies that got initiated through someone that's brilliant,
Hmm.
right? From either whether it be engineering or whether it be the science side. Even at Aruna, the chief science officer who was the founder, brilliant man when it comes to doing what he did in regenerative medicine. But, it doesn't automatically translate always on the business side either.
Right.
And sometimes that's all it takes is it takes someone that has the gray hairs that can come in and understand, is it an engineering issue? Is it a technical issue? Or is it a business issue here that needs to be resolved? And so they didn't need another smart engineer that had a lot of background in robotics. They
Hmm.
needed somebody with the gray hair that understood how to actually figure out how to focus and get to the goal line. And I found even as I mentioned when I was at iGate, I acquired three companies I acquired after, I took it public. the opportunities to the acquisitions always came about with companies that had been initiated by these founders that had a brilliant idea and some great science behind them. Their biggest issue was always focus.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much noise coming in every day to a company, whether it's meetings with strategics, larger medical device companies or pharma companies, going out and talking to investors. They're always bringing in new information that you have to learn how to filter and focus your business on what's the most important thing for a company that has limited resources. We're a company that does not have a recurring revenue stream. We get our cash in order to do our development by selling our shares. So you have to be very careful on how you use that money.
Mm-hmm.
And you're given that money for a reason. And for a company like us, we have one purpose. And so you have to remember that. And you have to maintain a focus on actually accomplishing that one goal. And I know that sounds obvious and easy, but it's not,
Mm-hmm.
because there is a lot of information that's coming at you, especially if you're a CEO that doesn't have a lot of that background. You've got your board members, you've got investors, you've got a lot of people that are trying to tell you what to do, and they can take you off of your game. So you have to remember that there's so much noise out there. What is it we're trying to accomplish, and what's the best way to do that? And from an engineering point of view, are we over-engineering?
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that I've come in here to accomplish. We know exactly what our first indication is, and it was chosen for a reason. And we can get into that, but put a pin in there. We need to make sure that the platform that we're developing right now is the right platform for that indication. And currently, it doesn't need to be any more than that. It just needs to be the right platform for that indication. And if we can solve that problem and get us to the goal line for doing that, that's where our focus should be. Doesn't need to be any more than that. Even if we want it to be more, doesn't need to be right now.
Well, let's unpack that now. I gave a very clumsy description of your robot, but why don't you help me out and explain it to our listeners and talk about that indication, and then I do want to drill a little more into the discipline that you're laying out that's necessary to move forward.
So the first indication we're going after is called ventral hernia repair.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a hernia, but ventral. And I'll get into that. But if I just step back, and then I'll lead back into the VHR, ventral hernia repair. When I had the discussions with Adam and some of the board members and other people here at the company, it's not just them doing due diligence on me, it's me doing due diligence on them as well and on this platform. And the first thing that I need to understand is there a reason for us to exist? Why do we exist? Why should anybody care about Vicarious?
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, that sounds obvious, but that's any company. Are we trying to solve a problem that somebody cares about? And so in our space right now, do the surgeons care? Because there are platforms out there. We have laparoscopy and we have the Da Vinci, which comes from Intuitive. It's been out there for a couple of decades. Why is it there's another system that's required? And so that's what I focused on. It's the first question I asked anybody I met here, including Dr. Barry Green, including Adam and Sammy. I want to know why they think we should exist. And what I learned very quickly is the limitations of the current platforms.
Mm-hmm.
The limitations of laparoscopy, the limitations of the other robotic-assisted surgical platforms. They don't have those freedoms of movement. They don't have the miniaturized robot, the full arms, the 7 freedoms of movement that you have in a human arm, we have in a miniaturized robotic with 2 arms and also the scopes, the 2 eyes that go fully into the abdomen. Why does that matter? The reason why it matters is because in the abdominal space, which is where we focus and where hernias are, over 50% of all of those abdominal soft tissue surgical procedures in the U.S. are still done or completed in an open surgery setting. They're not done with a minimally invasive platform. Even though we know what the benefits are, the reason why they aren't done with a minimally invasive platform is due to the limitations of those platforms. And so what we're doing here is to design a platform that overcomes those limitations. Starting with laparoscopy, it's basically like chopsticks with tools on the end.
Uh-huh.
Then when you look at the Da Vinci or the robotic-assisted programs, they put wrists on those chopsticks. And so it's better, but you still don't have full dexterity or freedom of movement. So you have to make a choice as a surgeon. Do you want full access or do you need full access inside the abdomen by doing open surgery, even though it's going to have all those complications and trauma associated with the tissue?
Uh-huh.
Or can you complete the surgical procedure properly with the limitations that exist in the current platforms? So a surgeon has to make a choice. All right. We're trying to develop something so you don't have to make that choice. You don't have to choose between open surgery, which gives you full access, full visual access, and full access from a function point of view versus a minimally invasive platform. We want you to have an experience like you're doing open surgery with a minimally invasive platform. And that's why it was so important to understand how can we miniaturize the robot and give it all the freedoms of movement that you would get with a human arm and give it the visual perspective you'd get from open surgery.
Mm-hmm. So, and I do encourage people to go to vicarioussurgical.com. They have a really great video there showing how the robot works. So you check the box. Why are we doing this? There's definitely a why. I think the next question is, can we do this? Is this something that is possible? You've got, as I said, a very cool robot. Do you determine if it's something that can actually be done, or is it just a neat robotic science project that looks great on a website but won't actually work in the body?
Yeah. And so this is another reason why I came in now. So they've been at it for 10 years. The company got started in 2014. Okay. The first approximately 5 years, we're really trying to figure out how to prototype the miniaturized arms for the robot and come up with the scopes as well, the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Took them a long time to do that. It took almost like 4.5, 5 years to figure out how to do that with multiple different prototypes. Then once you have that, now you got to figure out how to put the whole platform together. We have two big, huge pieces of capital equipment. One of them's the surgeon console. Okay, that's where the surgeon sits, and he's got his hand controls and his foot pedals. And he's got his monitor in front of him, and that controls the robot, which is sitting in something we call a patient cart, which is over at the table or the bed that the patient sits in. Okay, so those are two different separate pieces of capital equipment. Those weren't there. They didn't exist. What the company spent the first 4.5, 5 years on was really trying to figure out, can we miniaturize these arms
Mm-hmm.
and make them work? That took a lot because nobody had ever done that before.
Yeah.
Okay, it was very complicated. And there were, I heard from the founders here that there were time periods where they didn't think they would be able to do it.
Yep.
But they did. They did. That was the hard part, and they did it. Now, I don't want to say the easy part, but where they had to go next was building these pieces of capital equipment so that then the surgeon could control the robotic arms from a distance. And that's what they spent the next few years on. And they called those their beta builds. I'd call them an alpha build, but they were called beta builds. So those were the first things that they had. They really did that right before they went public. So around the time of going public is when we have the beta builds,
Mm-hmm.
and they built 2 systems. Okay, those beta builds, then they brought in surgeons to play with them to really understand, is it doing what the surgeon needs it to do? We're saying we're going to solve a need for the surgeon based on overcoming these limitations. So we got a lot of feedback from the surgeons using the beta models as to what should be different, what they would like to see different, what's working well, what isn't. And then we try to incorporate those into the next set of builds, which took a couple more years. And we call those our engineering builds.
Mm-hmm.
So the beta builds are the first time you have the whole platform. You get all the feedback from the surgeons. You incorporate that into your engineering builds. And that's where you're able to push the boundaries as much as you want. Where we are here in our facility, we even have a machine shop. So if a piece isn't working, we can go to the machine shop and we can do whatever we need to try and get all those features working at the specifications that the surgeons gave us feedback on that would be perfect for them. So that goes from the beta build now to the engineering build. We did that. We got everything working. We got surgeons back in to use the engineering builds, those platforms, and they loved it. So then your next step is to try and repeat that same build using your quality management system.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're using a quality system, which is required by the FDA and any other regulatory body, because a quality management system puts handcuffs on you. It's telling you now that you have certain requirements with specifications that can be tested that you have to abide by. You can't just go to your machine shop now and change a part. You have to be able to have traceability and auditability on every component, on everything you're doing in there, on everything that you tested, in case there's a problem ultimately in the clinic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in order to go into the clinic and use this on humans, you need to be at the stage where you're doing your builds using your quality system. And that's when I came in, this was the year where we finally did our first builds using that quality system. The first platform with the quality system got done in April. And then they wanted to see if they could do it again. And they did their second system. We did our second system in August, right before I joined. So we're at that stage now where a large part of the pressure testing to see if we can get those features are done. And now we're learning how to build and see if we can maintain those features using these handcuffs. I call it handcuffs. We have no choice but to use these requirements with the specifications that are in our quality system. And that's where we are. So we're in that final stage of development.
A lot of questions. What you've Vicarious, I think, has been interesting in that it's got a lot of relationships with healthcare systems, and I don't know how you define those relationships, but their partnerships have been announced, and I think have given you relationships and insights from those systems. Talk, if you could, a bit about that engagement with the healthcare industry and how I know you've haven't been around for all of them, but could you characterize for me the response from physicians? Because your surgical robot is just, again, so completely different than everybody else's. Is there a period of, well, what the heck is this? Or is it more like, oh my God, this is fantastic? It's probably a blend of two, but how would you characterize surgeon and the healthcare industry's response to the Vicarious robot?
So I think it's really important that you get the feedback from the people that are going to end up using your system.
Yeah.
Like, are we really doing something that you want? Again, I come back to right from the beginning. Why would I even want to be here if nobody cares? And so they had the foresight to actually build a small OR in the facility we're in, which allows us to actually use our system when we want to. We use synthetic cadavers, and we have the ability to actually use cadavers in here. And so that allows us then, with these relationships with the hospitals, to have their surgeons come in and play with the system and test it and use it. Okay. And that's where we get most of our feedback. That usability testing is really important for us with our final stages of development. All right. We can make sure, like, what we're looking for in the system is its stability. So do we have a system that's really stable? Okay. That's not going to break down or melt down. And the reliability of the arms, those robotic arms, and the scopes that we're using for visual perspective. So stable and reliable. And as we continue to finish and complete the development of the system, we need to make sure we're testing it all the time. And so that's what we do. We do a lot of OR. We call it ORs because we want to bring these surgeons in, and sometimes we'll bring in younger surgeons that don't have a lot of experience just to see. So it's not just a matter of having the greater degrees of freedom and being able to operate inside the abdomen. Is this something that's going to be easier for them to learn? That's also how you're going to get wider adoption. The adoption just isn't on the technical side, it's on the usability side as well. Okay. And so of course, we're going to bring in the experts that have done thousands of procedures using minimally invasive robotic assisted surgical platforms, but we want to bring in the naive ones as well. Is this going to be easy for them to use? And that's the whole point here is I think you're going to get greater adoption and you're going to be able to expand the market so you have less open surgeries done, not just because of the technical ability of the system, but also the usability of it. You need both of those.
Definitely. No, that makes sense. So how about your relationship with investors? Vicarious, I think, again, because it's got such I think, a hopeful approach and a really fascinating technology and a very cool robot. You've got the company has raised money from the past from folks like the Khosla Ventures and the Gates Group and Innovation Endeavors still hold stakes from early on. And it underwent a SPAC, was part of a SPAC, I think, in 2021, when those were popular. Give me a sense of how you're engaging with investors. I mean, I imagine there's still a long enough road ahead that you need to sort of understand where the capital could potentially come from. How do you characterize your relationship with past investors, and what are your fundraising plans for the future?
Yeah, so when I joined, and even before I joined, I spoke to some of the investors just to get their understanding and what their level of support is and how they feel about the platform. But yeah, I continue and I ongoingly am speaking with the current investors throughout the process. I think one of the things I learned from the investors was the lack of transparency. So even what I've just described to you, the different stages of development from the early prototypes of the arms, miniaturizing the arms, through beta builds, engineering builds, quality builds, actually hasn't been described that way to the even current investors. And a lot of them really misunderstood where we were in the development stage. And a lot of them, when I first joined, when I had these calls, they kept asking me, "Why are we delayed? Why are we delayed?" And how many times have I heard that? And so I had to really understand what it was that kept thinking, why they kept thinking we were delayed.
Mm-hmm.
These types of systems, even the ones that aren't as complex as ours, take 8 to 10 years
Yeah.
to build. Okay, like just take a look at J&J, Medtronic, and so forth. These things don't happen overnight, and they take a lot of money. And so when I started digging into it, what I learned is that unfortunately, what had been communicated publicly by the company is that we're going to be in the clinic this year, and they've been hearing that for the last few years. Okay. And they hadn't been told where we were in our development stage, that what we were doing with cadavers or what we were doing with synthetic cadavers was being done with either a beta system or with an engineering system and not a system that can go into the clinic. It was earlier stage. But the thing is and I don't take away from management, because things were going so well with those earlier builds, it's almost like you feel like you can accelerate the development into a controlled build.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where you think you are. You think you're going to be able to do that really fast. Unfortunately, it doesn't translate like that in real life. Going from an engineering build to your build now under quality management system, that rarely works perfect. I've never heard of it working perfectly. There's always going to be hiccups.
So you're currently publicly traded. This feels like it's a company that probably would have benefited from not being on the public markets, because public markets, just as you said, these surgical robotics projects are very hard. Medtronic was working at theirs for over a decade, and they just finally got their FDA approval recently. How difficult is it having to have quarterly calls on this project? How does it change what you're trying to do? And I guess I'm wondering if this is something that needs to go private at some point and sort of take on the identity of a traditional medtech startup.
I agree. It's always difficult. At what point do you decide to take a company public? And obviously, the cash needs are a big part of that,
Yeah.
right? And I think when you really dig into it, it's whether you're private or whether you're public, you need the support of some fundamental investors. Okay, and they had that with Cost of Living Ventures at the beginning. Was it the right thing to go public? I don't know. I can't go back there
Sure.
and what was in their head and so forth. Was it the right stage of a company to go public? Again, it depends on the money that's coming at you. If the money coming at you is a large amount of money that's required, and they're telling you that they need the liquidity of being traded on a public market, then I guess you don't have a choice. So I can't go back and say what was in their heads at the time. But yeah, I wish we were private right now. But having said that, even if we were private, you still need an investor to write the check for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't make it easier to find an investor because I'm private. What it means, though, is that I don't have to share everything that's going on if we're private. You still have to find your investors. At least when you're public, it doesn't have to be a big fundamental investor right at the beginning. You can find other people that are willing to support you because you do have some liquidity. So that definitely would like to win back the trust of the larger fundamental investors
Mhm.
again.
For sure. So where do you go from here? It sounds like you've got the sort of the quality guidelines in place. It sounds like it's moving forward more as a medtech might. What is your next step, or what are your next goals that you're communicating to investors and to others in the public? And do you foresee any sort of different operational changes in terms of the structure of the company or the size of the company? And I know you're publicly traded, so you can only say so much, but where are we
Right.
going from here?
So with the stage we're at right now, there are a lot of things that we're working on as far as making sure we can get all the features working at the specifications we want using the quality management system for our controlled build. In order to do that, we need to complete that development. And once we've done that, with all this testing along the way, whether it be usability testing or verification testing, we do that along the way to make sure that the requirements are working the way we want them to be working. Once we've done all that, we do what's called the design freeze, design lock, design freeze. That means the development's done. We've got all the features in there, the specifications that we want based on our requirements. And we've done the testing along the way to make sure that they're working the way we want them to. Now we go to what's called design freeze. That means the development stage is done. When you're at design freeze, right, you sign off on all your requirements. Now you go into the formal testing. I call it the pre-IDE enabling, because on the device side, we need what's called a de novo clearance for marketing. And in order to go into the clinic, which requires clinical data. In order to go into the clinic, you need to submit an IDE with CDRH. And so you need to get that cleared. So there's formal testing that's required in order to file the IDE. And they call that regulatory V&V, verification and validation. And on the validation side, that's going to require some in vivo work. It's going to require cadaver work and also in vivo work in animal facility. Okay. And all of the verification showing that you've done all the tests for your requirements and that it's working the way it's supposed to be working. And then that's the package or application you file with the FDA to go into the clinic. And unlike a drug, which is an IND for a device, it's an IDE, investigative device exemption. Okay. So once we do the design freeze, and we're targeting end of next year for design freeze, then all the development's done and we start doing the formal testing so that we can go into the clinic. We've already done multiple meetings with the FDA. We call those pre-submission meetings. And the majority of those meetings are around what are those formal tests look like, the protocols, get the blessing on those protocols so we can go into the clinic, and then also the clinical trial protocol. We've also gone through the FDA on that design as well. So all that's been figured out. So we know exactly, once we complete the development, we know exactly the testing we need in order to go into the clinic, and we know exactly the clinical trial that needs to be done in order to go commercial.
Are you identifying any other indications that you might go for, or are you focused 100% on hernia right now and keep your eye on the ball?
So we're right now we're going to focus on the ventral hernia, but we're also trying to make sure that we understand where we could go after that. There's other hernias, inguinal hernia, and there's other things that we want to be focusing on, even hysterectomies. Those require different tools as well. For ventral hernia repair, there's 3 tools that we will need in order to, commercialize. And those are the first 3. And some of those will allow us to do other, I would say, indications within the abdomen, but going to other indications that we want to go after will require different tools. So,
and last question for you as CEO, and you kind of hit upon this at the start. I don't think there's a noisier sector within medtech than surgical robotics. I mean, it's got a lot of different companies going after the same indications. There's a lot of people just watching and sort of handicapping winners and losers. I think by and large, everyone's rooting for more competition and more successful programs. But how do you, as a CEO, how are you able to sort of, as you said earlier, identify, what you need to work on next and sort of block out the other stuff that's coming your way, which I'm guessing is a lot of other stuff?
So I really needed to understand why ventral hernia repair. Why was that the first one that we chose? And when you take a look at all of the different procedures within the abdomen, which is where we're focused right now, it has the highest rate of procedures in the U.S. that are done open surgery. And there's a reason for that. It's really difficult to do with these current platforms. It's really hard. The actual hernia that you're trying to repair is on the ceiling of the abdomen. And when you're coming in with these tools that have limitations on maneuvering and moving, it's really hard for them to go back up to the ceiling. Whereas we go in through one incision. The whole robot is in there. It can move around to all the quadrants within the abdomen. It can go back up to the ceiling, go down to the floor. It can move all around. We don't have those limitations. So when I talk to investors, what I tell them is, we don't need to think about competing against those other companies. They have to compete against each other because the platforms are all very similar. We aren't. There's so much white space addressable market there. I don't have to think about even replacing what they're doing. I can go after, what do hospitals want to do right now? They want to be able to provide minimally invasive surgery to more of their patients. And that's what we can do for them. So they can continue to use the Da Vinci or the other platforms all they want for the current market share they're using them for. We're going to help them address all those patients those systems can't work on. I don't even have to convince them of that. They know that they want to expand minimally invasive surgery for all those patients the platforms don't work on. And that's where we come in.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, the narrative you're laying out here is this is more a very advanced medical device than like a surgical robot. At least that's what I'm hearing.
Definitely.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yep.
There's nothing. I look. I've only been here 4 months now as CEO, but I can't find anybody doing anything like what we're doing.
Mhm.
There are other companies trying to go in through a single port, a single incision. There are other companies trying to miniaturize, but none of them have done it like we have. And one of the biggest problems you have when you try to go in with a robot through a single incision is having the ability to have the same amount of force for grasping, for cutting. They have their own limitations, these other single port systems, which we've been able to overcome.
Really great. All right. Well, I'm rooting for you. As I said, I'm a fan of Vicarious. Now I'll be a fan of you as well, Stephen.
Thank you, Tom. Well, I appreciate it. It was good to see you again because it's been a while.
It has been a while, and I wish you the best, and look forward to visiting you, visiting the headquarters someday.
Definitely look forward to having you here.
Well, that is a wrap. Thanks again to Harmonic Drive for contributing this episode's FOMO. Thanks, of course, to all of you for being part of the Device Talks Weekly podcast. We'd love to see you at Device Talks Boston and Device Talks Minnesota. Because you're the best darn people there are, please feel free to use the code DTW25. Stands for Device Talks Weekly. 25% off to get 25% off the price of registration at Device Talks Boston, which is happening on May 27th and 28th, and Device Talks Minnesota, which is happening on May 4th. Please do us a few things. Subscribe to the Device Talks Podcast Network, or more directly, Device Talks Weekly, if you want to do that, so you don't miss a future episode. Please follow Device Talks and MassDevice on LinkedIn. And of course, please connect with us as people. I'm Tom Salemi. Connect with Chris Newmarker. Connect with our managing editor, Kayleen Brown, and of course, the entire MedTech news team, so you don't miss a future bit of news.